to introduce you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is David Pollard. I'm the chair of Mountaineering Ireland, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all tonight to this year's Lynam Award. It's really great to see the growth and interest in this over the years. Year on year, we see an even bigger crowd, so it's really great to see that. The Lynam Award really has become a really key part of our annual calendar. It's something that really marks Christmas. So I'd just like to welcome a few people. Obviously, I'd like to welcome Calvin, who's the recipient of our award tonight, and his wife Claire, who actually was the recipient of the award in 2014. I'd like to welcome Niall Grimes, who's going to be who's going to conduct the affairs tonight. I'd particularly like to welcome the members of the Lynam family, who every year come out and to support us. To Lee, to Dan, and to Rory, you're extremely welcome tonight. I suppose Joss was a key, such a crucial figure, I suppose, in the history of mountaineering in Ireland. He was for over 50 years. He was absolutely central to everything mountaineering that happened in this country, and the award tonight is in his honour. And finally, I'd just like to welcome all of you. As I said at the beginning, it's wonderful to see such a huge turnout tonight. And I say over the last few years, year on year, we see an increase every year, which is really fantastic. Because without you, this event would be nothing. So thank you very much. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to Niall and Calvin, and hopefully the technology works.
Does this technology work? Does your technology work?
What?
Hello. Many years ago, I began climbing in 1986. I began this weird sport of climbing. A few things aligned that allowed me the opportunity to take it up, and I was taken by some friends to a couple of crags in Donegal. And this was a weird little thing we did. We never met anyone else, and we'd sort of just go and sort of just feel really isolated in this weird sport with a few carabiners and a bunch of nuts. And we did this, and it was really interesting and really cool. And then we were taken to Fairhead one weekend, which kind of scared the bubbles out of me, but it's a big scary place. But then when we went to a place like Fairhead, we met this thing called the Irish climbing scene. Now, a long time ago, this is a time, all you people here probably part of the Irish climbing scene, but a long time ago, it was a tiny little family of people. And as somebody came from Derry with it, he sort of, we get a phone? That's the past on the phone once they sort of see how things are today. Tell them it's not too bad, but the inflation is a bit rough. So, I mean, a few years ago, we were taken to Fairhead. We started meeting this collection of people who were really committed to climbing the way we felt we were. And it was like, oh my God, these people do the same thing as us. And they had this sort of amazing family vibe about them, and a sort of, not a hierarchy, but as everyone knew who everyone was, and there's a real respect for each other. And it sort of, through all this, ran this amazing history and a culture. And I'd never experienced anything like this sort of history and culture, anything I'd done before. You suddenly understand that this isn't just a thing to do to waste your weekends. It's a thing that has got a whole world around it, a whole world of characters, and how it understands how it is. And it was amazing to see that. And central to all this culture that I was experiencing was this one character called Calvin. And Calvin was sort of, he seemed to be the central point from which all these things came from, through what seemed to be a passion for the sport and a sort of a love for people and an openness to everything. He seemed to sort of channel all these things through himself. That was my perception anyway, as a very young man. Calvin channeled all these things through himself and spread everything out through everyone else. It wasn't about himself, he just spread it through everyone. And it was such a cool thing, and I understood Calvin has been this sort of the godhead of this thing that I was starting to appreciate. So even from the word go, I always appreciated what he did to the world that I moved in. And I'm hoping as we go through the night, because he climbed for so long, you know, they go to the Arctic and they drill these holes down in the Arctic and pull out this big long plug from the depth center of the ice. It's sort of 28 meters long, and down the end of the plug, it's from like sort of 12 million years BC, and then the top is like sort of last year. Well, kind of that's what Calvin is. So Calvin's this plug that drills down into the past and drills itself all the way back to the future. The thing is, his love for climbing and his love for this world has never diminished. So it's kind of the parallel plug. So tonight we're going to read through a few layers of Calvin's plug as he tells us all about these different worlds he's moved in. And a lot of you people have climbed for a long time. A lot of people are new to climbing. So I think either way, it's always interesting to look at the opposite end of your journey. And I think through tonight, we're going to chat to Calvin about it for a while. And then if you have any questions, we're going to ask those. You're going to tell us what your questions are for Calvin. But just to bring it back to Calvin, I know it's going to be really uncomfortable for you to be at the centre of attention. I don't think this is quite your vibe. But if it's any help, I've never liked you much anyway on a personal level, so I hope that helps. So Calvin, if you take us all the way back, not all the way back to the start, because you're born in the wagon of a travelling show. Your mummy used to dance for the money to throw. But when you first met this thing that you understood as climbing, not just your first steps in it, what was your first realization that you had moved into a world of climbing for you?
The idea of this wilderness, and it was free. Being a Belfast prod, we're very conscious of that sort of thing, and I knew that once I stepped into the moors, that this is where I belonged and this is where I was going to stay. And it was with this guy up here who was eventually my mentor, and the people around him that sort of made me realize that I wasn't going anywhere else but into mountaineering. And this is Calvert Moor on the first ascent of Virgo in the Mourns. And you can see this style of climbing there. Boots, helmets were on and off, sometimes you wore them, they weren't really that popular. But the route would have been a number 3 hawser lead. And you can see the peg in there. And the thing, that guy was 15 stone. And if he'd have come off, he would have ripped everything out. So the climbing that I got into was all about courage and strength. Technique and skill, it came eventually, but mainly it was strength and courage, because the gear, if you had it, you probably didn't know how to place it anyway, because that peg wouldn't hold your hat, And this was, as I say, the first ascent of Virgo. And if you had the speaker going, you could hear Robin Merrick down below shouting up abuse, because it was a crowd from the IMC had their eye on it as well. And we were the Glenfofney Climbing Club. And they were an unruly bunch. They were a working class crowd from Belfast, because most of the climbers would have come to Queens and that, whereas Calvert and a few others set up this club of climbers. And the gear was expensive. You didn't need much. A couple of slings, as you can see. All we ever had was a rope around the waist, a couple of slings, and maybe if you had a few bob, maybe a peg and a peg hammer. And that was it. The big boots that I'm wearing now would be equivalent of what people would have seen as a sticky rubber coming in. We thought these boots were magic and you could climb anything. These are an Italian Torrieger boot, and it was just your style of climbing. And you presumed that because they were that international sort of continental boot, that they were perfect. And you did, you climbed to quite a high standard in boots like that, up to about hard VS and stuff like that. And
Calvin, how many people were climbing then? How big was
there was the Glenfofney Club would have been about 30. Probably
Belfast.
At the most, and you would have had about half a dozen serious climbers, and you would have had much the same in the IMC. This is the northern section of the IMC, not the southern section. At that time, just about 67, everything was changing. Gear was changing. It was the first mountain magazine came out. Rock climbing magazines were coming out. So the whole scene was changing, gear was improving, and the younger members of the IMC who would have come to the Glenfofny Club, because we were very close to Newcastle and County Down, and the club was notorious for parties. And so the younger members of the IMC would have sort of drifted towards Glenfofny, but still members of the IMC in our section. So it would have been very much like that. And other clubs were starting to set up as well. You had the CCPR, which was the Central Council of Physical Recreation, and there was a club set up within them. They then became Sports Council of Northern Ireland, the Slevador Club, and you had the Feargurta in Derry, and all smaller clubs coming up around the country.
So clubs are a big thing of the experience.
The war, yeah, you needed, because travel, nobody had cars. Even though we had a hut in the mornings, or we were limited to climbing on along Buttress, Slieve Beg. If we wanted to climb in Pigeon, we needed a car, right? And that's where we used to sort of look for Robin, who would have a car and give us a lift around, you know. So, and then the idea of going to Donegal was the Easter break time, you know, going up to Donegal. It was, everybody needed a hut because you couldn't travel around. It wasn't a case of like going to Glendalough for the day or going to the Mourns for the day. You had to go for the weekend, and you needed a hut because you hitched everywhere. And the idea of the huts around the Mourns, Glenfofny, IMC hut, and that, were fantastic spots, you know.
How do you acquire a hut if you're like a sort of little bunch of working class
Well,
neck ends? How do you get yourself an accommodation?
It was the same way of acquiring a hut at Fairhead. And you asked the farmer for a shack, and then you done the shack up. Right. And that was generally what you done. The IMC were a bit luckier. They had the Blood House, and each time a club looks for a hut, you know, it costs money. You know, just about this time, there's a group from the south, Emmett Goulding, Paddy O'Leary and a crowd, formed the Spilligan Club. And the idea was to bring all the top class climbers or the hard climbers together into one group, so to improve the development of climbing in Ireland. And at the time, I wasn't really concerned about improving the quality of climbing in Ireland. I just wanted to climb with harder climbers and meet these people, because we had heard a lot of this Emmett Goulding fella, and he was the only person we wanted to meet because he had done so much in the Alps and that. So that was our main interest, was to meet people like Emmett and to get information about
So when you start hearing about the Alps, because obviously the Alps is a long way away, you couldn't even get to the Mourns easily. The Alps is like a really long way from where you are. How do you sort of cover that distance there? How does it come onto your consciousness even that the Alps exists?
It's just through stories from people in Glenfofny and the Spilligan Club, and people like Emmett Nat, who'd been to the Alps before, and trying to grab information as much as we could go. And you just learn on the job, you know. We'd been climbing in the Mourns, and the whole idea was everything was ground up, and we were constantly looking for first ascents. In Glenfofny, what grade you climbed or what route you done didn't matter. It had to be a first ascent, you know, because there were so many possibilities in the Mourns to climb new routes. So we reckoned that going to the Alps would be just another step. We knew bugger all, you know, and we were sort of going from the frying pan into the fire, but we went ahead with that. And this is Willie on a route along Buttress, and you can see the cigarette in the mouth. That was Joe Brown, Don Willans. All the hard Yorkshire men would be smoking as they climbed, and so we had they were our heroes. And you can see the double rope there, the red and white. that was about 5 mil, and it was, it was used mainly for artificial climbing, and it was given to us, and you can see in his pocket there a couple of pegs and a hammer and a few slings, and that was it, and all the skills that we would learn there, we hope we would take to the Alps, and we weren't concerned about the standards or anything. The reason we climbed in the big boots was because you climbed in big boots in the Alps, and it was a bit silly because eventually we used to take the big boots off and put the rock shoes on. These shoes just here.
What do you remember has been the biggest jumps in technology? Like this doesn't look like it to me, but you're saying this was a big jump in technology. The fact you had big mountain boots.
Yeah, and the other thing was that came in just after this would have been harnesses. And harnesses and that came in a bit later into it, and protection with nuts. We were using industrial nuts.
Explain what an industrial nut is for
it's
people
just the nut of a wheel of a car with a thread through it, and you place that in the cracks. Or you use pebbles from the beach. Put a pebble in and a bit of rope around it, and that got you up. Now, in the meantime, just turning the 60s, these clubs were forming, various ones around, and there's various splits from the clubs. We groups would be moving out, they'd be falling out with each other, and the splitting club, which we gathered mainly with Glenfofney, we had got photographs of this place and Fairhead of a guy who was paddling along the bottom, took a photographs and sent them down. So we organised a meet. Calvert Moore and Jeff Earnshaw went up, and they'd done a route, a big chimney route in 1964. And so we showed the pictures to the Splitting Club, who most of them were better climbers and more experienced. So there was a big meet to be held. And that was the first time you had a gathering of climbers from different parts of Ireland coming together, because mainly we were isolated. We didn't have the outcrops in England where people would meet underneath a crag and there'd be banter and chat. If you went to the Mourns, you'd be all over the place. You'd probably see somebody in the pub maybe. Or if you went to Glendalough, people would be lost in the buttress. And people never appreciated how important Dalkey Quarry was for bringing people together. But we did get everybody together for this.
Back then, was there any sense of community between the different, there's north and south? Was there like a how were those relationships?
They were good. They were good. You would have had people like Shay Balan, Emmett, Paul McDermott, and who were quite sort of reserved individuals, very quiet, brilliant climbers. Then you'd have people like Eddie Gaffney and that, who were a bundle of life, and jumping around and that. So, and the introductions used to be hilarious. We would all be Sammy John, Wally, Calvin, Ian, and they would be Paddy, Sean, Seamus, profiling by introduction. But everybody got on great. The most they got, because of the travelling, Emmett had a car, and they would drive up from Dublin, and I would get a lift of them in Belfast, and they would come and pick me up at the bottom of the fall, at the middle of the falls, and then they'd drive me up through the Shankill, where I lived, and their only thing was, oh, Jesus Christ, these people are worse off than we are. Because they had this idea that all Protestants were from the big house. I was amazed that they had that idea, But we moved up, and this is the meet at Fairhead. Now you can see, that's Paul McDermott. Now Paul in the left here and Bruce on the right, Bruce Rogers. They were later killed in an accident on the going across to do the Sentinel Rouge on the Brevin Face in the Alps. And Paul, both of them were massive, but Paul I reckon if he had lived, he would have brought Irish climbing together in a way that nobody else could. He was really enthusiastic, really organised, and everybody thought he was, great. Anyways, Paul, Jimmy Heffernan, Tony Ingram, a very strong climber, and the fella at the back there looking out was going to make Fairhead history. Paul McHugh and Paddy O'Leary and myself and Bruce. And you can see the big boots, and we're only walking 15 minutes across the top of Fairhead, and that's the way we dressed. And the cagoules, they were the state of the art, They were, way everybody goes about now, like Barbie, but they were the in thing. And the whole idea, we were alpinists, then we were rock climbers. And that's the way we looked at it. And as you can see in '67, the Perlon ropes were starting to come in. And at the same time, we had harness. We didn't have harnesses to start with. And as I say, this fellow on the left, Paul McHugh, really, when we arrived at Fairhead, it was the same as when the first IMC lads arrived at the Burren Crag and Clare. They'd done the corners, but the main faces was just out of their league. And it was the same for us when we arrived at Fairhead. We were looking at the big chimneys in the corners. These main faces, we were used to climbing in Glendalough and Burn Slabs, and that were nice, easy, grassy ledges and good belays. It was happy days. And then this monster of a crag appears, which appeared to be loose and everything, but we battered on.
Did you recognise Fairhead has been the next step that you're going to have to take?
Well,
to improve.
This was the big next step in Irish climbing.
And you knew that.
And yeah, it had to be. Everybody said that, and that's why about that stage, a lot of the sprinting club disappeared, plus the trouble started up, things took a turn. But as I say, with this lad here, he would have made a big change to Irish climbing. And the Fairhead guidebook came out. There was about 20 climbs at the most, and there was only a handful of them that would be worth doing, and we'd done them over and over again. People talk about a route that Emmett done, Straypock, the off-width chimney, which he climbed ground up, no protection in it, up to the top, finished it. And people now look at that in awe, and they won't go near it because you can't protect it, and it's a squeezed chimney. But we used to do it all the time because there was nothing else. There was Hurricane, Doldrum, and Straypock, and that was it. All the other big chimneys we wouldn't go near. They were death routes, because when they were first put up, the blocks falling out of them were massive, cutting the ropes and that, So
did you have the equipment? Because it's
the equipment. The biggest nut we had was a Moac, and it's about an inch wide, 2 inches long, and that was it. You could swing it around inside the cracks, and it was on when McHugh done the first descent of Hurricane. We didn't know this. At the overhang, big wide crack, he placed a nice big polished chalkstone. And I'd climbed that, and he noticed the polished chalkstone, but it never struck me that it was hand placed, and eventually somebody took it out. But that was just another way of, like when you were cleaning a route, knocking the rocks off, sometimes you would try and knock them down into the crack so you could maybe put a thread around it.
And did you eventually sort of get the hang of the place?
Oh, well, as soon as I got the hang of the place, I got myself into loads of difficult situations on it, climbing stuff, like Toby Jug, which was just a massive loose tar, which you reckon, because it was a perfect column going up, but it was sliced like blocks. And I knew that if I started knocking the blocks off, I couldn't reach the next holes. So you had to climb the loose blocks, get onto them, then you get up onto the next section. And then when you get up, you kick the ones below you off. So
nobody else could do it.
So nobody else could do it.
Did you ever fall at Fairhead? Did you take falls?
What?
Did you ever take a fall?
Oh yes, yeah. I took a couple of bad falls on the rope tied around my waist, and it didn't bother me. And it's not like, you know, I thought I would have choked to death or anything, you know. In fact, after this trip, I took a very long one. And this is Sammy John and myself. We're heading on our first trip to the Alps. And you can see, I normally don't wear a helmet, but you wear one in the Alps. And you can see there, the helmet, that's a shipyard helmet. So it is. And the thing about it, we didn't know anything about the structure of helmets. If I'd have got hit in the head with a rock in that helmet, the helmet would have crushed me. You know, there's no padding or anything in it. And the rope is that red and white rope that you saw on the thing. When the French climbers, when they saw the rope, they just shook their heads, you know. But Sam was a student, so he had the student pass. So I hitched from Belfast, outside the Keys, from Belfast to Zermatt with all of that on my back, and hitched back again. And with the usual thing with the Alps, you need time. Now, most people then, because money was scarce, you had 2 weeks holidays, and the 2 weeks in the north was a 12th fortnight. You know, and so it was no problem me packing the job in, because it was either in the middle or the building site. So, you know, you'd pack a job in, you'd have your week's wages plus your lying week. So you had 2 weeks' wages, and I was heading off to Europe with £25, and I came back with a fiver. We literally starved ourselves, and we didn't realise that we weren't eating properly, you know, and so you didn't have the strength.
So did you do okay when you got there? Or did you,
I got there, yeah. And like,
you know, climbing okay?
And we did the usual routes in the Weisshorn and we were on the Smut Ridge and the Trifthorn and Rothorn Grat and stuff like that. So we were learning all the time, you know, and that was it. People always talk about the experience. You don't get a great deal of experience climbing snow peaks, you know. You're just climbing. We were learning. We'd been to Scotland and done bits and pieces in Scotland, but you know, the most difficult thing was putting crampons on, you know, and making them stay on. But experience, it just came with constant just sticking your neck out, and that was it.
I get the impression back then, as you said, climbing is all about the Alps. Did it feel like did you feel like this is what it was all about when you got there?
Oh, absolutely.
You left Fairhead behind. This is the real thing. This is.
Oh, my first look at this place, and this is where I belong.
Right.
You know, this is the Brenva face, and this is where Paul and Bruce were killed with a nice fall from that big couloir to the right of the picture, the Grand Couloir. When they were going to cross to do one of these, the Sentinel Rouge on the right. This is the triptych, and Graham Brown, the three big routes on the Brenva face of Mont Blanc. And it's the pear, where the Italians call it the plum. See the big pear-shaped piece of rock in the middle? That's the pear, and the middle one is Route Major, and the next one is Sentinel Rouge. They're not very difficult, but bloody hell, they're scary, because you're going up into huge seracs now. But it was great. It was fantastic. It was. Once you got up in there, it was like being in the Himalayas, you know. And this big rock face here, there was only one climb at the time on that. That was by Bonatti. Now there's lots. This is where everybody goes, to the Ackfiler. You know, massive place. So you know, we had done a few. Now nobody goes in there. It's very seldom you get a sense.
And when you went there, were you meeting like international climbers and sort of meeting all those people? What was that like? They come from the Shankill.
I'd say it's a first Shankill hood man in there. But like along this ridge here, this is the frontier ridge, the Kufner. That's the Trident, those two peaks. There was a hut there and a hut for the Trident called the Lafus. And in the 60s and 70s, you would see people, the huts would be chock-a-block. Both huts have fallen down. The huts would be chock-a-block with people, also people bivouacking outside. And when 12 o'clock came, they would all be heading for the old Bremva out there in the middle, and the Bremva Face, Route Major, and all these. And that whole sort of hillside over in the distance would be full of head torches, all bobbing along. And now you don't see any. The huts are gone, and there's been major landslides down, cutting across. So, you know, and everybody wanted to get the three. Emmett came the closest. He got the Sentinel Rouge and the Route Major done. And when Dermot and I were on Route Major, Emmett was going for the Pear, which was the last route. But there was so much rockfall that he came back over and joined us and done another ascent of Route Major. But it was, you know, I couldn't believe that I'm in the middle of that, you know. It was brilliant. And this is coming out the top, and you can see those seracs on either side. And it's absolutely, there's no good sort of standing around being, because seracs, you can't tell when they're going to fall. They just fall. And, you know, making your way, it's not hard climbing, but you're up at 4,000 meters, and it's hard work. But, and it is scary because you can't see where you're going. And there's always accidents.
And did the Alps take up your imagination for a good few years?
Absolutely.
For how long?
Well, still does.
Still does, yeah. And further afield?
But the brain, as I say, the brain is 21. The body doesn't realize it's 81.
Any trips to the Himalayas? Did that ever?
Yeah.
Oh. Ah.
When it was. When we were out with Shay, I met Claire in Chamonix, and we started climbing together. And Shay was my main climbing partner, Shay Belayan. Tremendous individual, really cool. If I get going in rock, it's tunnel vision, and I just keep going. Where Shay can keep me under control. Like on that route, we were caught in a storm. Just after that, we started up the route, West Face Petite, caught in a storm, really bad snowfall, and we couldn't descend the normal way because it was avalanche prone. And Shay told me it was avalanche prone, and it was obvious it was avalanche prone. So we made a detour and done a long abseils down the rock face. And it was a total whiteout. And when we got to the bottom, the last up, we'd run out of gear pegs. So it was our last abseil, and we were standing on the ledge, and it was whiteout. But I felt that the glacier was just below us. And we were there standing in this thing. And we'd both got frostnip at the stage and snow blindness. And Shay came down beside me. And I said, it's definitely there. And Shay was looking at me, and he always controlled my madness at times. But I said, it's definitely there. So I untied from the rope and got him to tie onto the edge of the rope that we were pulling down on the abseil. And I jumped. and I just went woof, and I hit the snow. and I was shouting up, "It's okay." So Shay just jumped out, and he says, "F ya, F ya." And we pulled the rope down, but it was he was in moments like this, he was fantastic. He could always keep the thing, and his climbing ability was superb. And you can see the gear, a couple of nuts, and a brass figure of 8. Now, in the meantime, in the 70s, I was working in England, and in the Lake District, and I got the offer to go on an expedition with Shay, and Pat Redmond and Paul McHugh, and to the Mannalia, and we headed off. I was delighted. I couldn't believe my luck, the idea that these Southerners would ask me to go on an expedition. So we headed off. Pat organised the transport for the gear. The gear went out by boat, and it never arrived. So we were in Mumbai, with no gear. So we headed off up the Manali anyway, and we met 2 old friends who we knew from Snellsfield, the Burgess twins, and they're notorious, they're rogue, but they're fantastic individuals for helping you out. And they'd driven across in a van, and there was 4 of them, and the British Army were there, organising a team for Everest. And I was a bit concerned because Paul and Paddy would be fairly mouthy about republicanism and that, and the British mountaineering crowd would all be Royal Marine Commandos or the SAS. But anyway, the Burgess twins went over, and we were all talking, and as always, they told us there were some camps up the glacier and that, and we said, great, we'd do that. And we went away to organise stuff, came back, and the twins had their rucksacks, but they weren't going anywhere. And we said, what's wrong, lads? And there was only 3 of them. And he says, one of the lads got a Dear John from the wife. So he wanted to take the van and drive back to England from India back. And I said, where is he? He says, he's in the van. We tied him up and threw him in the van. And we're waiting for him to calm down. He did calm down and they got on, but we didn't get anything done. We moved around. It was a bit of a disappointment, all that way, all that money, but it was a start. It was a start. So when I came back from England, and we got the Dalriada Club. The Spilligan Club had disappeared. We got the Dalriada Club, and there was lots more clubs forming around the area. The Rapparees, Sleevedoors, and all the rest. So there was all little groups going around. The Burren was getting attention, and in the 70s, Bob Richardson, because in the Burren all the corners had been done. Bob Richardson done marsh-handed crack on the main face, and that set everybody off. You had the quarry lads, Ken Higgs and Tom Ryan and the Windrams and that. So we were able to get that crowd into Dalriada and get transport, and then they led into the Burren, into the main faces, Donny and Ken and Tony O'Sullivan and Ken, doing lots of routes there. And it was the same, we were at the same time working away at the Fairhead. And this was most of the main developers, all very young lads. Right, Eddie Cooper at the very top there on the left, Dave in the middle there, Phil Holmes, don't know the lad, Tom Ryan, Ian Ray, Claire Dawson, Stell Fox, Keith Murphy, and myself. And it was strange to come back and see people like Keith and Eddie. And we had met Eddie when he was a young lad at the top of Ballycastle to St. Gully himself and Martin Manson and that. And we were delighted because over those years there was only Claire, Shay, Valerie McCartney and myself sort of climbing at Fairhead. It was hard to get anybody else to go up. The troubles were still in full flow, and the people in Belfast and that, they were heading down to the Glenfofney hut. Newcastle was hopping at the weekends because that's where people went to blow off the steam from a week in Belfast, you know, because I was complaining to Sammy John about why aren't they out climbing? He says, spend a week in Belfast. He says, you get down here, all you want to do is go berserk.
What was the scene there in Newcastle? What was the scene in Newcastle? What were people doing?
Oh, it was a pub. It was a hootenanny. That's what they called it. And it was like, the place was mad. People had just lost the run in themselves. Like the pub itself, the Harbour Bar, used to have a massive garage on the side. And it got so popular, there's so many people coming down, they just knocked a big hole in the wall and put chairs and tables in the garage, all around the garage, and a jukebox. And, you know, it was fantastic. You know, people could really have a fantastic time, you know.
And this is Escape from Belfast?
Oh, Escape from Belfast,
full of people like you.
Yeah, it was good.
And was that part of your weekend? Is that part of your Mourns weekend? Was that?
It was. Well, I stopped going to the Mourns. I more or less stopped going down. All my time was at Fairhead. You know, the winters, because you had very little time. Those of us that went to the Alps, we'd go in maybe at the beginning of July, or whenever Claire finished school, and we'd be there for the whole summer. So that time, Ken and Donny and all the lads, they'd be picking off the roots in the burn and Fairhead while over the summer. I never climbed in Ireland over the summer. I was always away in the Alps. And so we come back in September and you'd be climbing into the winter, you know. The last one, Eddie Cooper and Keith and Paul Dunlap, were they just took the standard of climbing up, you know. All of a sudden the routes were E5 and E6, and they were E4, but now they're E5, they're upgraded and all the rest. Then others like Paul Dunlap and Donny and that it was sort of open competition for everybody in to try and sort of grab the routes.
And were you involved in that too? Obviously, you're involved in that competition. Was it a competition?
I was.
Yeah. And did you?
I am pretty competitive at times.
And was that something really fun for you?
To me, it was more the new route. It was still this Glenfofney sort of background, where I was more, if I'd have done a really good hard severe, I'd have been as happy as doing an E4. Whereas the lads were looking at numbers, you know. And this is Tom Ryan. Tom was a devil. He has routes all over the country, and some of the scariest routes in Ireland are on the Mayo Sea Cliffs that he put up. You know, three abseils down into the sea, and then sort of climbing back out. And you know, they were really scary. And the Burn, Lugalaw, Dalkey, Fairhead, just anywhere where there's a crag, he will have put roots up on it. And he was like, we'd be in the hut at Fairhead and getting up at 9 o'clock, and Tom would be coming back in after clinging roots. But he was a terrific individual. He was killed in an accident in the West. And because of as I said about socialising, you know, the burn was ideal. Most of the crags, we couldn't come together, and this was like a holiday crag. It was really, you know, people and groups could mix, so it was really good entertainment. But and you know, the leotards and all the rest. This is Eddie Cooper, I think, in Silver Queen or something.
Quicksilver.
What?
Quicksilver.
Quicksilver. You remember that? Yeah. Quicksilver. And I'd say he cringes at that photograph.
Calvin, a lot of change happened over these years and different people come along. I've always associated you've been very concerned with style and ethics. Was that, am I right in thinking that, was that always very central at your approach to these things?
Yes, it was. The ethics thing was a big deal, you know, because first of all, climbing in the mountains, it was all ground up, and we never considered abseiling down routes and practicing them on top ropes or anything like that. And anything you'd done, if somebody said they'd done a route, that was it. You accepted that. You would never question it. And it can be really disappointing when, you know, somebody says, so-and-so done a route, but, you know, and that was the attack. The other thing was everything that came in. I think because mountaineering and climbing is such, it is delicate sport, because it's so easy to upset the whole culture of it. Like when wired nuts came in, people weren't happy at first, because if you had a wire nut in your hand, you could reach up and put it in, and you'd be top roping the route, you know. And it's good things like that are questioned. And it was the same with friends and everything like that. You know, we put a friend in, and well, you know, it's almost like cheating, you know. And you know, and the same with the ice climbing and everything, with the drop picks, and that came in, you know, ice climbing became easier.
You were saying about you being as happy doing a hard severe as an E4. Does that reflect nothing because it's more about the spirit of something than the numbers less important?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm still over the moon if I climb something hard, but it's just you produce something, you know. It's like if you think of say somebody like Bill Perrott, who I think was Bill Perrott, put up Paradise Lost. The number of people that have climbed that route because of his bit of work, you know, thousands and thousands, you know, and that's the main thing, is to get people to do your route, and they'll come back to you afterwards and say, great that there, you know, it's brilliant, you know, and it is about the new route, it's not about the grade, you know, and the problem is because the way things are going, there's only the hard routes left to some degree, you know.
So if you look back over your long career, what routes have brought you the most pleasure in that respect of your own climbs?
Probably a route like Selangor or Cuchulainn, you know, sort of they're fairly heavy, you know, good grades, very exposed and great climbing, good rock, and that, you know, it's really great climbing. Other things like Toby Jug, and you know, Toby Jug would get a lot more sense because it's slightly easier than the other two routes, you know, and you know, it was good. And re-climbing Wall of Prey was a big one, you know. It's Arnie Stropkan's route, but big lump of it fell off. You know, doing things like that. And route in Ben Crome, Blood Strangers, it's superb. You can see it for miles. From the opposite side of the valley. It's routes like that are great.
So, in these ethical changes that have taken place over the years, which at the time when it came along caused you most inner turmoil? I'm not saying you might have went on to accept it, but which did you perceive as being the biggest, which technical or other type of change was the one that you felt the biggest challenge to this sport that you loved the way you knew it?
Well, the coming in of chalk, we felt it was you know, it's I think it's doing more damage to bouldering than it is the climbing, but we felt it was, you know, it just wasn't worth it. But we knew we were fighting a losing battle, and you got to accept when you can't win. And you know, just about everybody on the climbing scene was against chalk, but they knew the advantages of it and the way things were changing, and that the other thing, well, it's not so much an ethical thing, was the use of bolts in traditional crags, and that was an absolute no-no. You know, it's like in Ireland, we don't have the rock. You know, the only outcrop we have is Dalkey Quarry. That's it. There's things like, if you take something like Alton Quarry, right? Alton Quarry has been going from the 60s. It's been used by the CCPR, then Tullymore, then all the rest. And nobody ever went near it. No climber would go near it. Only groups from the centres would go in. But no climber ever went near it. Once they bolted it, the numbers are enormous. You know, if you were to bolt a crag now and tell some farmer that's okay, once you put bolts in a crag and a cliff, you're going to get hundreds of people per weekend on that crag, and you can't get to it. And anyway, we don't have the rock. Most of our climbing is traditional. We have Knockmore and Inishmore and a few other places. But for limestone, Claire and I traversed the whole of Sligo, round to Dundalk, looking at all the limestone quarries. And we found one that could be done, could be bolted, but it was rubbish. It wasn't worth it. But there's just nothing there, you know. There's, and it's you know, without any, if you want sports climbing, then you're going to have to go to Spain or France. You know, that's it. We don't have the likes of Little Orme or the north coast of Wales, where you've got these limestone outcrops. If you had them, then you could bolt them. You know, Knockmore was around for donkey's years. People knew about it. But I mean, if you want to develop a sports crag like that, you got to take your hands out of your pockets. And you know, there's only a few other people who would sort of step up to the plate and do a bit of bolting. Yeah, sure. You know.
Hey, so I've done it. So in the recent years, climbing's become a bigger thing. Look at all these people here, and Ireland's full of climbers now. It's moved away from, in some ways, from this sport that you knew, the trad climbing. It's moved into bouldering and under a wall. What for you has been the best and sort of things about the way that sport's gone the last 10 or 15, 20 years? Or not the best thing, what have you noticed the biggest change has been as to what it is today here?
Well, as soon as the walls opened up and started the bouldering competitions, that, I think that was a big winner. I think a lot of people realized that, yeah, all this training and these indoor walls and that were something else. And I think that changed people's attitudes to sports climbing and all the rest. And it was the competition started in Dublin and that sort of brought people forward. People who would never dream of going sports climbing or anything. And then that started it, you know. And then plus the fact we had gone to places like Yosemite and realized that you could have all this sunshine and all this rock, and you weren't looking behind you to see if the weather was breaking like you did in the Alps. So there was this whole new open climbing scene that didn't involve alpine climbing, and it was brilliant. You know, big walls, and all you wanted, the same as the Alps, when you didn't have snow and ice. You know, so all those things changed it in the sports climbing.
And today in 2023, you're as much in love with it as ever, I'm perceiving, and you're as hungry for it as you've ever been.
I am, yes. And like, I would probably clip more bolts sports climbing than I do trad climbing, because I spend most of the summer away and the winter. I mean, it's nowadays to get a group to go to Spain for a week is easy, you know, and to clip bolts. So yeah, I see the change and I love it. You know, I like competition climbing. I like taking part in the bouldering comps and the lead climbing, because it's like doing new routes. You know, when you step out there at a lead wall in a competition, you have no idea what's ahead of you.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody wants. You know, and this is why I get annoyed when I see really good climbers top rowing routes at Fairhead, where I say, you spoiled it for yourself. You know, you could lead that and it would be a different climb, you know, and because they have the ability, you know, because they're just trying to protect themselves. They're looking for safety, you know, and
Sure.
things there. All of that. This is just all of that crowd, like Ken and Tom, and the Rapparees and the other groups. They were all out discovering Gola and Oe and all these other little crags around, you know. And this is one. I think this is the best limestone crag in Ireland. It was second to the Burren, you know. Tormore. It's a brilliant crag, and that's one. It could benefit. It's a trad climb, but people would say, well, it's dangerous getting out to the top. Why not put bolts in it? You know, but you know, it would just. The
I
problem
thought
is
for
you
one
can't-
second you're going to say it would benefit from having a few bolts in it. You're about to say that, weren't you? And then the light went on.
Boom! I got electric shock. But it's a beautiful. In fact, what you look at, we always have this thing. People say, okay, put bolts along the top and let people lower off. You know, because the last meter's a bit shitty. You know, goes along, and you know, you say, yeah, but who controls it? Who's got the nerve to go up to somebody and say you can't do that? And that's the difference. You know, if you're prepared to step up to the block, and a lot of people aren't. What you can see the left-hand corner of this, that's a route, the Mad Sweeney goes up. Somebody put a Fear Ferrata, cables, stirrups, everything, right up across all the routes and up there. You know, we've no idea to this day who done it, but the cables and everything were in place, all the nice rebar hoops and that for walking up. And some lads from UCD saw it and told us, and I made a phone call to a friend in Sligo, and they were gone the next day.
All right. Calvin, just to finish, I'm going to take some questions from the audience pretty soon, but just to finish off, when you look back overall, how many years is it? It's like sort of 60 years, getting close to 60, 70 years. How does it feel now? Because this is the point of looking back. I guess the point of these things, it is a time to reflect. How do you reflect on it all? What's been your greatest pleasure in this climbing life you've had in Ireland?
Oh, just the people I meet.
Really?
Oh yeah, just you know, the crowds that I've met over the years, you know, and the fact, and again I get back to these things, the walls, they've brought them all back together, you know, the pensioner mornings and that, you know, and And these were people you were sort of meeting at the crag 50, 40 years ago, you know.
Yeah.
And it's the people, you know. And meeting Claire.
Does anybody in the audience want to ask Calvin a few questions? Oh, hang on. Do I talk about that picture, Calvin? Looks like a special one for you.
This was a trip I done with Joss in '76 to the Kishwar Himalayas, and Auntie Latham on the left there. By saying myself, Claire, Emmett, and Joss. And Joss was always the man to go to. Like that route we done in Manalia, it was Joss who put us onto the mountains there, and he had these peaks that in Kishwar, and fantastic peaks. And at this time, it was alpine style climbing in the Himalayas. And these mountains, what we wanted in the Himalayas was something like the Walker Spur or the Brentford Face. And Joss had them all lined up. And we done this peak. That's Joss and Emmett. Boylan's Boots. We were sponsored by Boylan's Boots.
Do I give him a shout out?
Yeah, this was a peak. Any other young climbers out there, this is the Agar, Kishwar Agar, and Cathedral Peak. But Shay and I and Claire and Valerie went out on a reconnaissance, and we just brought a small amount of climbing gear, and because we didn't need a liaison officer, and we had it well hid, and we made our way in there, and when we got in, we saw that big couloir going up the right-hand side, and Shay and I reckoned that, you know, we'd go for it. So with basic gear, a Primus full of paraffin, and some tins, and yeah, really basic gear, but we got stuck into it, and the climbing was fantastic. It was mixed granite and ice, and we were going really well, but the weight that we were carrying with food and that, and we didn't bring sleeping bags, we just brought a bivvy bag, and we realized high up on it that, you know, we were flogging a dead horse because we hadn't enough gear. So we abseiled back down and decided we'd come back the following year. But when we came back, Anthony Nathan and I were going to set into it. We woke up that morning, Emmett and Joss and all, we packed the gear, and they would keep an eye on us and maybe follow later. And just as we got up, all hell came down that couloir. The whole side of that slope on the right there, everything came down and came shutting out. And we were all just standing there. And the dust hit us. And we were, you know, that was it, you know. And I said, that's the avalanche going, lads. You know, maybe it'll be okay. And Joss and Emmett and Claire and Emmett looked at me. No, we're going down. And that was, we worked really hard on that trip. I mean, we were carrying massive loads, and we tried a few other peaks. But it was great. To me, it was great to be on the trip with Emmett and Joss, and they were fantastic company. And Claire and that. It was really a great trip.
So, any questions from the audience? You must have all known Calvin for a long time, a lot of people here. Any sort of, anything you want to let off your chest with him? Any sort of ethical arguments you've had in the past? Falling out over a bit of chalk or a boulder or something like that? Somebody must have a few skeletons in the cupboard. Anyone going to stick your hand up if you got a question for him? Anyone? I'm going to point to somebody and make you think of a question. The good-looking young man in the front.
Just about
just hang on for a microphone there.
Just ask about Calvin's career as a guide, qualifying, and the years he spent guiding people all over the Alps.
Yeah, well, it was a fantastic time. The thing we started guiding, I think Ian Ray, Dawson, Dermot, and all the rest of us, we used to work as instructors for Tig Lynn and that. We weren't qualified. In fact, none most of the big centres, Brennan, Glenmore Lodge, if you were a climber and you had the right climbing under your belt, you worked as an instructor. And I continued guiding in the Alps. And after that, when I'd say same for Dawson, the same for Ian, whenever we went to apply, you had to have a certain amount of stuff done, 50 ground courses and all the rest. And we would all had that done before we thought of becoming guides. So that part of it, that transition was easy. The difficulty would have been skiing and that, which we got over. But we would have been out sort of chancing our arm in Chamonix and Zermatt and that with groups, and Scotland and that, for long before I became a proper guide, say. But guiding people in the Alps I loved, because if I'm climbing with somebody, especially if I'm doing any steep ice or rock climbing, I climb much better. When you're climbing with, when you're looking after an individual, you really pull the stops out, and you climb a great curve. It's a bit like soloing when you solo. You climb perfectly when you solo. When you're soloing around, everything is perfect, and guiding is the same, because you've got because basically you're soloing, but the person below is your responsibility. And I love climbing. I love guiding, and I never liked guiding Mont Blanc. It was a pain in the backside. But taking people out on routes, like leaving a hut at 1 or 2 in the morning, and a starry night, getting down onto the glacier and crunching your way up, it's just superb. You can't beat it. You really feel lucky to be there. It's great.
What's the one route you'd love to do what's the one award you wish you'd won but you never won? What's the one route you wish you'd done but you never got to do?
The Integral on the Integral Putri Ridge onto Mont Blanc, over the Aiguille Nord and up onto that. That's a route I would have loved to have done. We got up on the Aiguille, Eddie Cooper and myself, got up as far as the Aiguille Nord, but got chased off by bad weather. But it was a good, again, it was my love for that part of Mont Blanc.
With the development of climbing, particularly in the last decade and so, in terms of climbing walls and competitions, and now we're an Olympic sport, and it's making Hollywood movies and things like that. What would you like to see in the next decade for climbing?
To see, I would like to see proper control over the Olympic climbing, because I think that the way it's going is to keep the Olympic Committee happy and keep the numbers happy, because otherwise you wouldn't have speed climbing in it. And it will, and because of that speed climbing being there and being more popular than bouldering or leading for the public, then you're going to go back to 40 years ago, when the Russians, 40, 50 years ago, when the Russians had proper speed climbing competitions out on the cliffs, where they manufactured routes on massive cliffs, sort of, 6 pitches long, and they would have races up those, and you'd have hundreds of people along the bottom of the cliff watching this. And I can see it going that way for lead climbing. They're going to bring speed into lead climbing, I'd say, to keep the public happy, But it's up to the organisations, the mountaineering councils, and that to try and keep a tight hold on the Olympic committees and people like that.
Calvin, you left out a fair bit of your Belfast upbringing. Tell us more about how the industrial places that you came from maybe shaped your approach to climbing, if it even did that. But I always got the sense that the workplace that you came from really hardened you for the adventures that you ended up in, for the scrapes you ended up coming through.
Oh, it did indeed. I mean, we lived for Nance the Mill, and my childhood would have been climbing sort of. We would have broken into the mill, not to steal anything, but just to climb up over the big walls in it and around the structures, and it was childhood was fantastic in Belfast growing up. Total freedom until you became 14 and started work. Then it was an absolute pain in the arse. But because the working out, work was hard, and that was it, and you accepted it. You know, everybody knew their place.
Calvin, this isn't a question, this is a comment. 20 years ago, when you took me up Mont Blanc, you never told me that it was a pain in the arse.
Wasn't very polite.
Last couple of questions? Yeah. Here first.
Yeah, just a quick question. What was your go-to food when you didn't have your power bars and your energy gels?
What was your go-to food? Kit Kat, Kitty Kat?
You know, it was usually tins of pate.
High quality stuff?
High quality, you know, the cheapest food you could buy in Chamonix. Anything, you know, power bars, anything, you know, we never thought about training or food or energy or anything like that. The best hill food I seen was a lad making it. I thought that was a good idea. It was his first trip in the Alps, and he had a massive baguette, and he just split it and filled it full of lettuce, tomatoes, and cheese, and that was his hill. I thought that was a great idea, and we took that idea onto the doing the walls in Yosemite, because it's moisture, you know, in the heat and that. So it was good. That was Dave Mitchell.
Over here?
Thank you very much for giving just a lecture. I wanted to ask you about female climbers. Have you encountered more female climbers in your time in France? Possibly, I know there were a lot of skiers, but maybe in this regard.
What are you saying? Is there more female climbers in France than here?
Yes, I mean, I saw some, but I wonder what was the balance. Obviously poor, but just curious how many were there.
The whole scene is designed around men, around the male thing, you know, and it's only through the only way you can change that, or the main source of climbers coming onto the scene has always been through universities, you know, the university clubs and that. They would have been the main people bringing people in, and it's up to them to sort of educate the women coming in that it will improve, because you can see the standard rising within the climbing walls, and we hope that something trickles from the climbing walls into the trad session, into the trad climbing, and into alpinism and that. We hope that that comes through, because it's at the walls where they can discover how strong they are, and that, you know, they don't need to be able to do pull-ups or anything like that. But the only time I seen my first trips to the Alps, the only time I seen female climbers were Polish women who had come into Chamonix to climb. They were the only women that I'd ever seen until I met Claire.
Last question up here.
Yes.
So you're still very active climber. You keep developing, opening new lands and vertex. at least 20 lines within 10 years. It's my guess, easily, all Swiss routes. You keep giving from Fernet, and I wonder, like, do you have any tracking? How many lines did you open in total in your life?
How many new routes have you done, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I keep, but I'm still in the B division compared with Jerry Moss and Ian Ray. I never count them. You know, sometimes I just say 300.
Any last one? One last one there.
Calvin, I'm alive now, okay? Getting back to nutrition. Can I ask you, how do you square the late nights in the House of McDonald's and Hunter's Bar and hard climbing the following day?
So that's a nutrition question. How do you measure up going to a McDonald's house in the pub and climbing next day?
I never survived it. You know, I know one fella only climbed on Saturdays, and on Saturday night it was a House of McDonald in Ballycastle, and then Sunday it was a lie-in.
Amazing, everyone. Is that it?
It's absolutely fantastic. So just maybe once again, we just I have to say, Calvin, I got a whole new level of appreciation when I heard you climbed in Byland's boots. If anybody's old enough to experience Byland boots, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so we'll come on to the fun part of the night. So we're going to do the awards. So Rory, I think, is going to join us. And somebody hopefully has the medal.
Thanks, Rory.